Hello everyone. Thank you for joining our meet. Definitely Mr. Jeff White, our newest webinar co-host over here. We're going to be having a talk today, and I'll be introducing Mr. Jeff White to you. If I can also talk a little bit about Mr. Jeff White, he is an industry leader. He has been a senior UX designer. He has over 20 years of experience, and we can also get a bit into that. Based on his experience as well, he's also designed for companies like Motorola and also for Amazon. If you want to know, he's also designed for the Amazon Kindle and also for the Amazon Alexa as well too. Also, Mr. Jeff White, he also has his own company. He's the founder of Step Ladder, which is also a design group as well dedicated towards making projects in the UX field. And yeah, I would just like to introduce him to you and possibly talk more about his experience. And we do have some good talks for you as well here today too. So if I could hand it over to you, Jeff, if you could just tell us just a little bit more about your experiments and about you, we'd like to definitely hear some more.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for that very nice and kind introduction. As Denisia mentioned, I have been doing UX design for a long time now, 20 years, which makes me feel incredibly old. But it's for better or worse, it's the truth. And yeah, I've had a lot of different experiences in my career. I've had a really, I think, lucky career. I've been fortunate a lot. But I spent about the first 12 or 13 years of my career as a full-time employee. 6 of those years were at Amazon. Before Amazon, I worked for a healthcare company and also a broadcast retail company called Jewelry Television, which is exactly what you think of when I say that. They sold jewelry on TV. Maybe some of you have seen it if you're on, you're up at like 3 a.m. eating Cheetos, you might come across Jewelry TV. But anyway, it's kind of, I always kind of giggle when I talk about that job, but it's one of the most interesting and fun jobs I had. But anyway, I've done a lot of different stuff. I've worked in a lot of different industries. I've done consumer stuff that's kind of like millions of people using an app, and it needs to be very streamlined and simple. I've always done really complicated stuff that's more B2B enterprise work, where it's just super complicated, tons of features, tons of users. You have to make sense of all that and figure out how to make it as simple as you can. So I've had a lot of different experiences. After all those years as a full-time employee, I got involved with a tech startup that I became the co-founder of. And all the startup-y things that you all probably read about, just like I do, that can go wrong with startups went wrong with that one. And that one kind of imploded after about a year and a half. After that, I really didn't know what to do with myself. One thing I knew is I didn't want to go back to life as a full-time employee. I kind of got a taste of being out on my own as an entrepreneur, and just really worked for me, really resonated with me. It was a whole new set of things to learn about. And I just knew I wanted to keep pursuing that. So really what I did is I decided to start consulting, contracting, freelancing. Didn't really know how to go about it. What I did is I literally just emailed everybody I knew in the design field I had met and worked with in my kind of recent experience, and said, I'm going to try this. No clue what I'm doing. Please help. What should I do? Any tips appreciated. And that just kind of quickly turned into doing contract design work back at different teams at Amazon with people that I had met over my years there, and a few other companies as well. And then over time, that just kind of organically grew into this firm that we talked about earlier, Step Ladder.
I could ask you one question too.
Sure. Yeah.
When you reached out to the people in the design groups that you did know, do you feel like you got more of a proper response towards gaining in UX than actually doing something like just applying somewhere, you'd say?
Do you mean more of you mean like networking versus applying for jobs? Mm-hmm. So we'll kind of go through this. I know we're going to talk about the economy and how to stand out and get hired and get gigs when things are tough. And I put together a Google Doc for y'all with a section on networking. I'm going to speak from my own experience. I'm a huge believer in networking. I think it's one of those things that everybody talks about. It's a cliche that feels kind of lame and intimidating and hard to some people, but everybody talks about it because it works. And that has really been my experience. I've had, and I wrote this in the doc, but I think in my whole career, I've had 4 full-time jobs and somewhere around 20 clients. So 24 total jobs, clients, projects, whatever. 20 of them I got through networking. I haven't interviewed for a job since, well, I haven't gone through the formal application process for a job since 2006. Everything that's happened since then in my career has been networking, relationships, being scrappy and kind of hustling and reaching out to people. I think that is really one of the secrets for people to think about and take seriously, especially in times like this when there are a bajillion people filling out all those same job applications. So what I think I always get a better response, better luck, better results through networking, relationship building, and kind of going down that path.
Question for Jeff.
Yeah.
So networking, right? I think it all depends on context, right? So do you think there's a difference for networking, for people who have worked in a large company, for example, Google, Microsoft, for you, Amazon, rather than somebody who hasn't? And like, what's the difference, do you think? And do you think the approach changes depending on like their work history?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely changes. We were talking about how I just got started contracting, and the truth of it is I had a massively unfair advantage. Like I started doing that 13 years into my career, where I already had a big network built up. I already had relationships built up. I knew a lot of people that had worked directly with me, and they trusted me and knew exactly what they were going to get if they worked with me. And that just it's an unfair advantage, which everybody should try to accumulate those over your career, get as many unfair advantages as you can. But it's definitely different. I mean, I emailed people that I knew and talked to, right? And so of course they're going to respond and help me out. It's totally different if you're doing something like sending someone a DM on LinkedIn that you've never met before. Mm-hmm. Both of them work, and I recommend doing both. But the reality is a lot of people out there, I'm sure a lot of people in this meeting are just getting started in your careers, and you don't have that network built up yet. And that's fine. It doesn't mean that networking is not going to get you results, but to your point, it means you'll have to go about it differently.
Yeah, definitely. If we could also branch back into, because you were talking about how you did like a starting in like a tech company, and also just also being like a founder of StepLadder. If you could also talk like a little bit about that as well too.
A little bit about what? About working in a tech company, or
talking about branching into tech as you were like a founder, and you're also the founder of your company as well, StepLadder. If you can just talk about how your experience was with that as well too.
Sure. So when I got involved with the startup, that one wasn't really networking, but it was a chance encounter. I met the guy who was the founder of this company at a soccer game, after a soccer game, and he told me what he was doing, and I told him I was a designer, and he showed me his website, and it was terrible. It was a terrible website, and I basically told him as much and said, "This is one of the worst websites." I think my actual words were, and I found that I can get away with saying things like this as long as I'm nice about it and have a smile on my face. But I said, "This is one of the worst websites I've seen in a long time." And I see a lot of websites. And then I just kind of broke down for him. I'm like, "Here are all the problems that I see." And he just looked at me and was like, "I need to work with you." Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there's any kind of actionable advice for anyone that comes out of that, aside from just, one thing that I wrote in this doc I'll share with you all is to just consistently put yourself out there and meet people and talk to people as much as is possible, and mm-hmm. things will happen. That's kind of a part of networking. That's how I got involved with that tech startup. I was still a full-time employee at Amazon, but I started working with this person, this founder, kind of on the side, and was a UX advisor for him for a while. And then I became a contract creative director. And then eventually I left my job at Amazon and then became the co-founder and chief product officer of that startup. And I remained there for about a year. So that's how I got into that startup gig. That was just total luck, chance encounter.
Yeah.
But maybe,
I
and
just think that's amazing too, because you took advantage of an opportunity. Like a lot of times, I've heard, because I speak to other designers, they're just having like either a coffee or a meeting and they go to like a birthday party and they just bring it up randomly in a chat, like, hey, what do you do? Or what are you about? And you're just like, hey, I'm a designer. I've recently heard a testimonial for one of my close design friends. He just went to his sister's birthday party. And one of the people over there was just talking and he brought it up that, hey, I'm a designer, and he showed off his work. And from that, he ended up having a large scale project, which actually went on to get implemented because he not only was a designer, he was a coder as well. But not a lot of designers are like that. That's like the one unicorn that actually can do both. So I just thought it was very innovative how you took that opportunity to actually turn that also into a goal. And I think that's very important as designers. We actually just extend ourselves, like you did say, just to find more opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's huge. The things like that have happened twice in my career. That's how I got hired at Amazon. Also, was in a similar way. This was less like random encounter, after a soccer game. This was because I had done some work, kind of in the early 2000s around how to do agile UX, and the other designer I worked with at this company, and I wrote a white paper about things we'd tried, submitted it to conferences, and that's how I ended up speaking at conferences. The way I got hired at Amazon was by meeting someone at a conference I spoke to, that I happened to sit down next to at a bar. And he was like, I went to your presentation this morning, and we got to talking. He worked at Amazon. He's like, do you want to come out and interview? I think you'd be great. And that's how I got a job at Amazon, was through being involved in the design community, kind of putting myself out there, taking some risks, and just being in the right place at the right time. I see Jenny has your hand up. Hi.
Yeah.
I have a question for Jeff. Earlier, you were talking about your work on B2B, right? And also consumer products. And I am just curious that, like, what is the difference between designing for B2B products versus designing for consumer products, besides the obvious complexity of B2B, right? Like this, how do you design for scale, and like what are the different types of problems you face in both scenarios?
So different types of problems. I mean, it's hard to give a generic answer to that, because obviously it's specific to whatever company or context you're working on. But generally, they're about what you mentioned, which is just scale and complexity. Doing stuff for consumer audiences is all about just being super simple, super to the point, removing as much clutter and chaos as you can, and just being hyper focused on one or two things and doing them very well. It's the kind of thing where it's like, you hear people talk about a lot, like if you hand an app to your grandma or someone like that and they can figure it out quickly, that's good. That's kind of, to me, that's how I think about designing in the consumer space. That's where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No one would have that expectation for a really complex B2B app. So it's just different. And typically there are, at least in my experience, there's a much wider range of types of people, use cases that you have to think about and support. And it becomes an exercise in figuring out what that world looks like who are all the different people, what are their needs, what are they trying to do, what are the problems, figuring out what the business is trying to achieve. And then really, to me, it's about prioritizing it. Who are the most important actors in this system? What are the most important tasks? And then I always think of different levels in an interface. Like if you think of the first landing page you come to, that's level one. A detail page you can click into from a list view or something like that is level two. Each one of those pages have little menus and things. Those are different levels. The way I approach it is, what are the tasks? How important are they? And then that tells you what level of the UI to find a home for them in.
Okay.
And that's
so you're saying,
how,
so you're saying it's like more task focused, more workflow and more task focused.
Yeah. And there's just more stuff. A lot of times it's data heavy stuff. There's dashboards involved. There's really complicated tasks around dealing with a lot of different data in the system and doing a lot of different stuff with it. So it's really about complexity and managing it.
Right. Would you say also the design goals are different? For example, like, is like user retention is less of an issue. Like you wouldn't be thinking about the same or designing for the same goals in a business or B2B, B2C scenario.
It kind of depends.
Okay.
A lot of times in the B2B space, you feel like you can, quote, get away with a little bit more because
Mhm.
it's harder for people to leave those applications, especially applications that are super painful to get into. A lot of products out there, you have to go through a months-long sales process and onboarding process just to get your users in the system and start adopting that as a company. And so once you do that, the company doesn't want to leave because it's so painful to start over.
Yeah.
So
Sunk cost.
yeah. So there is a tendency to feel like you can get away with more, but I encourage people to avoid thinking like that. There's still tremendous value. And again, doing the best you can to make things simple and streamlined for people using it. Because if enough people have a horrible experience using that B2B app, that's going to build up into frustration and the company leaving, right? And for applications like that, when you lose a client, it's a big deal. It's a lot different than having a little bit of churn and maybe in the consumer app. But if your company loses a $8 million client, that's painful.
Yeah, because in the B2B space, there's fewer clients. But each one of them, each account is like a lot of money.
Yeah. So I think it's a nuanced thing, but doing the best you can to make things streamlined and simple and as good as you can is always a good idea, regardless of consumer or B2B or enterprise or whatever.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
If I could ask, so we do have one question in chat before we do get into it. And I guess we already touched base on this already because we were talking about briefly before we really get into it, networking. So I have a question from Jonathan King. It says, actually over here, first question is from Narav. How would you ask a local business to network on a project redesign and application? And I would just say basically the same thing, like you would actually just, branch out, introduce yourself first and foremost before you actually go ahead and you talk about implementing a project for them, because besides for doing a project, you're also a person, They'd like to know a bit more for you before they actually offer you a gig or a side job. So what would you have to say in regards to that also, Jeff?
I think that the key to starting from scratch and getting into relationships like this is to not ask for anything right at the beginning. I think people make this mistake a lot. I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn and elsewhere where people don't even introduce themselves. They just say, "Can you do this for me?" And that, and some, honestly, sometimes I just do it because I want to help people, but it's not the best approach. The thing to do is to be a little bit targeted about, like in this question here, local business. I would go and learn everything I can about that local business.
Mm-hmm.
I would figure out who is running it, or who I might, if it's a small business, obviously it might be easy to just walk into the business and talk to the owner. If it's a bigger startup, it might be more difficult. So figure out who you think you can realistically get in touch with and learn all you can about them. If they are active on social media, this is a great kind of secret, I think, for anyone that you want to connect with that is active on social media. If you just do simple things like their stuff or comment on their posts, people who are content creators and are doing things on social media are craving attention, right? They want those likes and comments and the engagement. So just start engaging with their stuff if you see them out on the social network. And do that for a couple of days or a week before you send a message.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you send the message, say, "Hey, really like what you're doing with your business, really appreciate your content. Just wanted to say hi, thanks so much."
Mm-hmm.
You didn't ask for anything. You've already provided some value to them just by saying something nice and showing that you know something about them and their business. Try to make
a face to the person as well too.
Yeah.
You're not just one out of the many people that you just clicked connect on, just, hey, so and so wants to be your connect, and you're just like, okay, who's that?
Yeah. So I would start do your homework, start a relationship, and be nice, and see if you can get some back and forth going. and then just kind of ease into that ask. You can say, you know, if you've got a local business and you want to do a project for them, you can just start getting curious about their business and saying, I'm so intrigued by what you're doing, would love to learn more about it. Like, what's hard about your business? What are you trying to do right now? And just be curious and see what you can learn. And then when you feel like the time is right, then maybe if you learn about some problems they're doing, maybe what you do, and I've done this in the past to get attention from really super famous people that are very visible, is I would go and actually design something. And you don't have to kill yourself. It doesn't have to be a super in-depth thing that you toil away at for days or weeks, but you can just say, hey, I know you're working on this, had this idea, here's a quick mock-up or prototype. What do you think about that? That's how I would approach things like this. And then you can see if it'll blossom into, maybe the person you're talking to will be like, wow, really interesting. Here's some feedback. Can you take it a little further? All of a sudden you're now volunteering for this company. And if it keeps going, maybe you can start charging a small hourly rate and see where it goes. So that's how I would approach situations like that.
Yeah, I think that's very innovative to actually extend yourself and give a live prototype. That even goes further than just simply doing a wireframe. So I think that's also amazing as well too.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is also just a good start for us to start talking about just the meat of this project. So the current marketplace of designers in the UX world. This is our number one thing we actually wanted to talk about. And me and Jeff, we had like a side talk about it recently as well too. As we all know, starting from, I would just say, from Elon Musk, he did go ahead and he did a bit of cleaning. So far, I've seen about 14,000 employees, they've been let go. And then conglomerate from that, as we know in the tech world, a lot of people have been experiencing layoffs, job loss in the marketplace, and a lot of people, not only in the tech world, that also falls into a lot of designers, a lot of UX designers have also suffered from this. And basically, the marketplace of tech is really finicky right now. A lot of people are not really sure. So I guess, what would your take just to be on that, Jeff, about the current marketplace?
Yeah. So I think a couple just kind of broad kind of mindset-y type things, I think, to start with. One is it's just a tough time. And I know it can be scary and intimidating and demoralizing and very difficult. There's all different kinds of pressure. And so just to acknowledge that it's a hard time for a lot of people. And probably if people in the room and in your group are having all the feelings around that, it's okay. I think most of the time it's not something that you're doing wrong. This happens in the economy sometimes, and it's always temporary. So just know that it's somewhat normal. A little more broad thinking on the economy, I think. I would just keep in mind, tech layoffs are in the news right now because everybody loves tech, everybody pays attention to tech, and news outlets get a lot of traffic when they write about the stuff. And tech is a small fraction of the overall economy in the United States. I think it's less than 2% of the overall economy. I put a link here in this document. I'm kind of looking at this. Y'all just check it out whenever you want to, but I'm going to kind of talk through it and then stop me with questions or tangents or whatever. That's fine. But there's a good episode of the New York Times podcast from December where called "How Layoff News is Hiding a Hot Job Market," and they walk through. The key thing to think of is, yes, a ton of people have been laid off in tech and some other industries too, and that sucks. I'm not trying to gloss over that. But some sectors of the economy are firing, and that's bad, but not everybody is. Yeah. And the reality is most of the economy is still hiring right now. So I think that one thing is pay attention to what's going on in tech. Certainly, that's a good thing to do, but don't obsess about what's going on in tech. Mm-hmm. If tech is laying off right now, go look for those other industry verticals that are hiring right now. I listed 4 of them in the doc, but leisure and hospitality is hiring, construction, manufacturing, information technology, that's stuff like, or information industry, that's stuff like publishing, security, telecommunications. All those spaces are hiring. And it might not necessarily be a dream job or what you had in mind when you started your design education. If you had dreams of working for Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is, which a lot of people want to work for companies like that, that's fine. But in times like this is where you have to be a little bit flexible. And especially if you are trying to start your career and you have no real experience yet, if you got laid off and you're under financial strain, broaden the world of possibilities for you. There are zero things wrong for going and working in banking if that's what you've got to do for a couple of years to get some cash rolling in and build up some real experience. So I would think that, I would say, don't focus too much on tech. Look for those other pockets in the economy that aren't often talked about, that are hiring, and focus your attention there if that's what you got to do.
So if I could bring it up, I've also talked, and I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I've speak to quite a few people just about this current circumstance. A lot of people feel like just the job economy in general has really slowed down, because compared to before, the responses from companies are just really like ladled down. So if I could just briefly pick at it, and I could also share my screen for the Google Doc, or just pull it up. What I have to say for that is, a lot of designers that I speak to feel just a little bit lost. They don't really know what they should do. They just feel like, thank you, Jenny. They just feel like it's just a bit hopeless right now. So what would you really offer to like newer designers? Because especially we're in an economy, I've seen a bit of people getting laid off. A lot of designers feel like they're being overshadowed because even looking in like these new roles, like entry level, I see stuff like 3 years or apprenticeship, even like you need 2 years of solid UX experience. And we're all just like, what is that about? Is entry level even really entry level anymore? Does it exist? What do you think about that?
I think it's, candidly speaking, it's ridiculous to see an entry level job position that requires anything more than 0 years of experience. Entry level should be entry level. That means you don't have experience yet. And that's fine. I was just looking on LinkedIn jobs yesterday, and I saw exactly what you're talking about. I did a search for UX design. I saw 11,000 results and thought, oh, that's good. And then I started narrowing down by experience level. Okay, entry level. Oh, sweet. Still 6,000 results. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time going through it, but every single one that I looked at said we need 3 years of experience, or 2 years, or even 5 years. So I share the frustration and wonder candidly what people are thinking when they write a job description like that. It's kind of always been like that in the design profession, I think. The real, just to get down to brass tacks, the thing you have to do in environments like this is to stand out. The reality is it's always been hard to get a start in the design profession, even when things are good. Even when there's not a tough economy and tens of thousands of really qualified and talented designers being laid off and looking for work, and maybe competing with people who are getting started for lower level positions. It's always been hard to get a start in this field, and the thing to do is to stand out from the crowd. I put a bunch of thoughts in the doc around this. We've already talked about the best way to do that, which is networking and being scrappy. Everybody out there is applying for jobs. So what if you don't apply for jobs? When I get a lot of people reach out to me about potential work, and the ones that, I'm going to say this, and I don't want it to come out the wrong way. What I'm going to say is the loudest people win. I don't mean be aggressive and be mean and be overbearing, but the most persistent and consistent and assertive people who are doing it in a nice way will get attention. These are just people who go above and beyond what everyone else does. Sometimes I post jobs to LinkedIn because I need to hire. I get a lot of applications, and then 1 or 2% of those people will track me down on LinkedIn. They will send a connection request. They will send a DM. They'll say, I appreciate what you do. I want to talk to you about XYZ. Those are the people who stand out. And the reason it works is that for a couple different reasons. One, that's how I am too. And I just appreciate when people are scrappy and they hustle and they're hungry, because I think it works, and I just respect it, and I want to help people who do that. But two is they made it easy on me. It is, don't forget to apply what you know about user-centered design and UX design to the interviewing recruitment job scene too. Those people who sift through thousands or hundreds of applications have a hard job. It's hard to do that. It just takes a lot of time. If someone just gets right to me, I haven't looked at their portfolio, I haven't seen their resume, I haven't triaged them yet and found a reason to figure out that they're not qualified and just reject them. Now I know who that person is. There's a relationship there, and I'm much more likely to talk to them or be more forgiving when I look at their portfolio or resume, because I just kind of want to help them, and they're nice, and we're talking now.
Okay.
So that is the best way to stand out. The other stuff I would say are the things that you've heard a bajillion times. You don't need to hear me talk about how to make your portfolio good, things like that. But I think networking is the best way to stand out. Your portfolio is the second best way to stand out. That's what you got to do in situations like this.
Mhm. Yeah.
I have a question in regards to like shifting maybe away from tech, because you've been doing this for like 20 years. I'm sure you've come across projects or partners that like have low UX maturity. So I'm wondering, how do you navigate that? In particular, how do you make the case for UX in projects or in teams where maybe that's not there?
Yeah. This is a great topic. I think there are this is one of those things, like so many things in our field. If you ask 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers. So I can speak to the way that I've approached this. No company I've ever worked for is perfect, and I don't think they're out there. There might be a few, like if you go to Airbnb or Idio or something like that, and they've just got, it's like design mecca. They're doing everything right. I've never worked for that company. Most companies in my experience don't have a super duper high quote UX maturity in the way that we think about it on paper. Every place is somewhere different. And I think a lot of designers get into this mindset where they feel like they have to wage this war with the people they work with to show them and educate them, and really show them how they're doing it wrong is how it's taken a lot when designers take that approach. What I've always done is to start by going with the flow and working in whatever way they're currently working and used to, and do that for a while, maybe your first 4, 5, 6 months there. Just get really good at doing it the way they're doing it right now. Finish some projects, do really good work. If it's painful, just go through the pain. It's temporary. Build up trust with people and establish some relationships. And then you can start saying, ooh, I see this opportunity for us to do this a little bit differently. I think it'll get a different result. That's the way that I have always approached situations that's been successful for me. It's not, here's how you do UX. It's not a UX design centric thing. It's grounded in what your stakeholders really care about, which is outcomes. I think this product is gonna convert better if we go interview some users and figure out what is hard about this or whatever it is. That is the way to shift culture, in my experience. You got to start getting really good at doing it the way that they're doing it, build up the relationships and trust, and then pick your battles and strategically inject change a little bit at a time. It's definitely a long game.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you for that insight, Jeff, especially as you can say, quite a lot of our members are also here from Lab Coat UX, and we also talked about that. So just as a lot about more community building, and we found that even with a lot of our members, like building a community and speaking to more people, a lot of our members are actually gained like jobs and open up more opportunities. So I was also very happy to hear you say that just doing that extra mile and just putting yourself out there is really the best way to go. Because just blankly applying to like job applications and everything, it's not really gonna get you really that far in this current marketplace.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very interesting for what you did say off about that. But if I was to say one special thing, so say for instance that there's a company like a newer designer wanted to apply for, even if they're networking and such, and they reach out to the person, as you did say. If I was to get my example, I reached out to a person at a company I really liked. I have the experience, I have the 3 years, and I introduced myself. I said, hey, I saw your post on LinkedIn. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I put off my most best qualifications. I talked a bit more about myself. And then she said, okay, Denise, yeah, I would like to know more. Shoot off my resume, shoot off my email. Sorry, we're looking for somebody with 5 years. I have 3. What's that about?
You know what? I don't know. I will say this. I've done a lot of interviewing, over the years, and interviewing is just difficult and bizarre and strange. The things that happen internally at companies once your resume gets in there, or even after you go through an interview loop, are weird. Ultimately, they're in a position where they've got to make a decision, and sometimes I've seen the way that some companies hire, and I have felt like it's a miracle that anyone ever gets a job, because there's no rhyme or reason to things. Like in this example you just gave, this person knew you had 3 years of experience from the first minute that you started talking, and they saw your resume, right? So why did you go through an interview process and then they came back and said, oh, we need somebody with 5 years? Like,
So I like to use LinkedIn more to like build connections and community.
Yeah.
So my profile is completely open. You can see everything on that. I'm a person who came from, if I could talk a little bit about me, an illustrative design background. So I have about 15 years of that. I'm very familiar with design systems. I have interviewed people for years. I have done jobs for them, of course. And then I branched into UX design. So I have a lot of convertible skills. The thing is, if my profile is open and I apply to you, and then I reach out an email and you're just like, sorry, looking for somebody with 5 years. Did you even look at my portfolio? Did you see my work? What's that about?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of discouraging, I'd say a little bit. And I have a few friends who've also experienced that, when they're just like, they have the work, but it's just like, we want some more years out of you,
Yeah. It's well, I'm sorry that happened. I think that it's not uncommon. My sense is there's all kinds of different reasons that things happen in the recruiting and job seeking world. Sometimes it's hard to explain them. I kind of feel like the reality is, like, don't assume people are going to look at your LinkedIn. If you're talking to someone who's like, if I don't know who this person was specifically, but if someone is a recruiter at a company and they're recruiting for 20 different roles, think about how many applications, conversations, things that person has to manage. And sometimes they're just trying to make it through their day, and what they've got to do is triage all the applicants they have. And so they're going to find, whether it's fair or not, or right or wrong, they're just going to find quick ways to rule people out. Mm-hmm. And that's not always going to make sense. And so I think that as painful and as discouraging as that can be, it's just the reality. It's not something you did wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's when, just having grit and being able to tough it out, it really comes into play. Like environments like this, you only got to get one yes. Right? The things you do and try, you might try it dozens of times. You might try it hundreds of times. I hired someone out of design school a couple of years ago that had applied to 700 jobs before I met them and hired them for a job. 700. And that's painful and that's difficult, but you only got to get one yes.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that, what are you going to do? You just got to keep going and trying your best.
I could ask you another question. So besides for also being a designer, And I see Christian, I'm at 500. Christian, I feel your pain. So if I was to build on that, so I'm also a senior at college for design school. So I found that also just being a design student, through COVID, or, the current bug that we're going through, a lot of school is remote. So I don't see an issue why they would have that problem having that, between school and kind of thing. So a lot of the times when they ask for, hey, do you have your bachelor's? I'm just like, no. That's also something I feel like through the applicant tracking program, you get blocked through a lot. Or even if you have set amount of experience, they're just like, hey, you don't have your bachelor's. But I've seen a lot of people who haven't even finished school. They just have the experience and, they have the job. So it's just like, why has being a student, I would say, kind of feel like a punishment for some people, especially when it comes to entering certain industries, especially when there are people who, they're more socially capable and they put themselves out there and they do get the jobs. But some people who are just like, even if you're a junior, so why is that a blockage?
Why is being a student a problem when you're trying to get hired?
Yeah.
I think that I think it all comes down to what most hiring managers are looking for out there is quote real experience, right? So if someone can see you're in school right now, or you're in a boot camp right now, or you just came out of a boot camp, probably what's happening in their mind is they're going, this person doesn't have any real experience, and that's what I want. So I'm going to say no to this person. I again think that the education thing, especially the higher education thing, is an interesting thing. I mean, everybody goes through it. Everybody thinks you need to do it, but the reality is I don't think many people really care. What they want to know is, you have the experience that I need for this role, and I want to work with you. There are some companies that do have really stringent requirements around education. One of my friends is a director at a healthcare company. He works in IT, and he cannot progress any further. He's been around a long time, like I have. Sorry, I already said he was a director, but he can't go any further because he does not have a 4-year college degree, which is completely weird. He's worked for this company for like 15 years. He's really good. But anyway, sometimes weird things happen like that. I think that if you're running into problems because people are seeing that you're in school, again, I don't want to be a broken record on the relationship and networking thing, but that's when I think that really helps in doing whatever you can to get real experience and focusing on that. If you feel like education is hindering your progress, then just don't focus on it. Talk about your experience, or get experience, or build relationships instead, and that will probably help.
And I do have a question in chat for you from Mohammed Halak. I hope I said your last name correctly. I mean, no offense. So it says, good afternoon. Do you think that AI can be an alternative for UX designers? So as we already know, what's going on in the current industry when it comes to AI, if you can just branch into that a bit.
Sure. So I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen with AI yet. I think that stuff is really going to change. And I think we're starting to see that a lot just in the past month. Some of the things that have been happening are pretty amazing. Some of them are very scary. I think that it will disrupt some stuff in our field, but I think that ultimately it's not going to replace human beings. If it does, we have some other larger issues to tackle as a civilization. But here's how I would think it. I would think of it as another tool to make you faster and better at what you do. This happened in the graphic design profession a long time ago when computers came out. Everybody who did traditional graphic design, this is way before the internet really became a thing and people were making lots of software, but graphic designers freaked out when, there started being computers and programs that did graphic design instead of the traditional print on paper way. Everybody thought that graphic designers were going to be replaced. And the reality is that's not what happened. They just became a lot faster in what they did. They adapted to new tools and became proficient with using them and used it to their advantage. So that's how I would think about AI right now. It's definitely, I think that we should be paying attention to it and experimenting with it and learning how to use it. I think that some things like, I'll get into the prediction business a little bit, but this is just my take, and you should take it with a big grain of salt, because if anyone is telling you what's going to happen with AI, they don't know.
Yeah.
Unless it's like Sam Altman or something like that. But
yeah, it's a very new industry for people
Yeah.
that actually think, because it's just really computer-based learning. And even though computers are so much faster than us, you cannot replace the user's experience with pretty images. You know, at least that's from my take.
Yeah. So that's how I would think about it. To be more tactical about it, or give a specific example, I think of things like design systems. Right now, there are a lot of designers who specialize in designing, creating, and maintaining design systems. So they're creating component libraries in Figma. They're working with an engineering team in their company to actually build those components that get used. I think it's a matter of time until you can go to ChatGPT and say, create a set of Figma components based on the iOS human interface guidelines, but modify them with my company's brand traits and this color palette.
Yeah.
And you hit a button and it's going to go, here's your Figma file. That can be weeks or months of work, because a UI designer doesn't have to sit and create all those components. So I think that stuff like that is going to happen, but designers are still going to be needed to go, here's how you use those components. Here's what the business is trying to do. Here's what users are experiencing. Here's how we need to construct those things together into a successful product. It's going to be a lot faster to do some things in our field, but you're still going to need designers. And so does that make sense? And
yeah, I do believe it does make sense, because we shouldn't actually blotch out AI, because it is very useful. I know quite a lot of people who they use ChatGPT just to rewrite something, just to make it sound more comprehensive and better. So even though AI can be seen as a threat, it's very useful as well too. So it's not something that we can easily brush off too much. And I don't think we should be too scared about it, because computers can never really truly replace people, at least not in this century. It's kind of impossible right now. But yeah, I hope that did also answer your question as well, Mohammed. If I could ask a little bit of an out there question, just so we can get a little bit more back into topic, because we were kind of branching on this.
sure.
What was one of the most least conventional ways you've ever seen like somebody branch in to design? Because you were talking about how basically you did hire somebody off who was like a design student and they applied for like 700 jobs. What is one of the most least conventional ways you've seen somebody branch into the industry?
Oh man. I don't know. I haven't worked with this person specifically, but I put a link to her stuff. Some of you may know her already. She's on LinkedIn. I'm going to mispronounce her name. Amelia. She graduated from boot camp a couple years ago, has found employment as a professional designer, but her background was in science and healthcare as a researcher. Had nothing to do with design. But check out the link and check out her content. The link is in the Google Doc. But she tells a story about how she used that to her benefit. Having a scientific background, highly analytical, and able to do a lot of research that's applicable to design. And she was up against people who had come from graphic design or illustration backgrounds who had much better visual skills than her. But she was able to just find the right people, find the right role, play to her strengths, and find a job in that way. So, but I've heard of people getting into design from all kinds of fields. Our field is pretty young, so it's not like architecture or medicine or industrial design where there's decades of history and education and professional culture built up around it. So at some point, everybody started from some other profession, but I've met a lot of architects, interior designers, graphic designers, things like that. And then every once in a while, there was someone who's like, I used to be a pediatrician and I just didn't like it anymore. So I started over or whatever it is.
like a pediatrician. How did you even branch into this field?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But we come from all over, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very so interesting that even though somebody doesn't even have that direct experience, they have a lot of convertible skills. So definitely, like we did talk about, just generally that networking and putting yourself out there and being an active participant did help quite a lot of people actually to secure jobs in different fields. So yeah, I do believe a lot of our members and people here, we also do appreciate you branching onto that input as well too. Um,
Sure.
if I was to build onto that as well, just to say, yeah, I'd say even your designers or people who are just trying to get into the field, definitely expand yourself and talk to people. One of my biggest, if I was to talk about me a little bit, one of my biggest projects I've ever done, I've led a team internationally of 4 designers. And I just got that contract best by talking to one of my friends who owns like a jeweler business. She's a jeweler watcher. She has a business on selling jewelry for women. And I just told her, hey, this is my work. This is what I can do. I have my big laptop and I have my portable laptop. So I just whipped out my Figma file and I'm just like, this is all the stuff I'm doing. This is what I can do for you. Are you interested? And she just said, are you kidding, Denise? Yeah, of course I want to do this. So
Great. Good for
I
you.
brought my work to her. I thought that was very important. So even if I was to just branch onto what you're also stating in here, Jeff, just going with the flow and just networking and making sure you hit all those fields, just talking to people and putting yourself out there. It's very important because if you can bring your work to a person and show them your value, even if you don't have those years, I think that's very important.
Yep, for sure.
I have another question in regards to kind of like changes to the field. I know that there's a lot of senior UX designers who feel that like, I guess that like branching out of skills, like in particular, people being more focused on like UI and things like that is taking away from like UX and like user-centered design. And I was wondering, Jeff, how do you feel about that? Like this kind of divide between UX practitioners who seem to be pretty solely siloed in UX versus kind of everybody else.
Ooh, the good old UX versus UI debate.
Yeah.
This is one of those things. The designers tend to get caught up in these debates, and honestly, I wonder how valuable it is to burn a lot of calories thinking about it. The reality is, you got to have them both. I'm not sure if there is much of a separation. At least if there's pixels involved in an interface, it's not just a voice interface. You need to design stuff visually, and it needs to look good. And if the better it looks, the better the product performs. That's just the aesthetic usability effect is a real thing. So I don't really get the tension between it. There's always room for improvement. If someone is, quote, just doing UI design, and I guess, I don't know, I don't really participate in this debate, so maybe I can't speak super intelligently about it, but I guess UX designers are getting mad at people for doing UI design because they feel like they're not doing UX design right.
Yeah,
And that's the source of the debate.
Yeah.
I mean, so what? Go help them get better. Like, I don't think that UI designers are cannibalizing our field. I don't think it's like, it's just a non-issue to me. There are plenty of UX designers out there who aren't, quote, doing it right either. So everybody is somewhere. Everybody has stuff to learn. Everybody can get better and improve. And we're all designers. We're on the same team. We should be helping each other. So I would ignore it. Do your job.
For the most part, I just think these things are one and the same, if I can say that. I hide a little bit. I think they kind of fall one into the same. I think you can't really have the UX without having the UI. So I think they're just the same feel, if I can be like a little bit of devil's advocate.
Yeah. I've always looked at it, and everybody has different perspectives on this, and that's fine. I've always like looked at it as the Venn diagram. UX and UI, they are a little bit different, but they're very, very closely related, and there's a big overlap. And that intersection of that Venn diagram is where that's what a product is. There are like different skills. You can certainly just be a UI designer and not do some of the things that we do in UX work. That's a thing, but they're both important. You need both. People should be nicer if there are people fighting over this stuff and work more together. I think that's my take, at least.
Absolutely, definitely. Okay, so I do want to thank you so much for having us with us today, Mr. Jeff White. It's been a pleasure just to hear about your experiences and just how you went through navigating the UX design world. And absolutely, people, please look into that Google Doc Jeff has provided for us. It has a lot of valuable insights on how you can network and get ahead in the field. Basically from us and also from Lab Coat UX, I do thank you so much for also taking the time to speak with us. And I do thank you for being here. It was a very innovative conversation. I do appreciate, as well personally, your time as well.
Okay, thank you. It was really fun. Thanks for having me, and good luck
Thank
out
you.
there.
So everybody, please check out Jeff. I have posted his LinkedIn down here in the chat, and also please look at as well the Google Doc. We do thank you for coming in. If you can join us as well on LinkedIn, we are Lab Coat UX. And also Jeff, he has a lot of insights as well into UX UI design world and more projects. Please look into his page as well. And we do thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for this talk, Jeff.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. You take care, everyone. Bye-bye.